Who yields time? The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Congressman Paul.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you for yielding. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
I rise today in support of H.R. 1 and in opposition to the Miller Amendment. The Miller Amendment obviously would negate everything we're trying to do in H.R. 1. One of my favorite bumper stickers simply says, legalize freedom. And I'd like to think that's what we're doing here today, is legalizing freedom to some small degree. The workers in the public sector already have this right to use comp time. There's no reason why the workers in the private sector cannot have this same right as well. The bedrock of a free society is that of voluntary contracts. And it's easy for many of those who oppose this bill to understand that voluntary contracts and voluntary associations in personal and social affairs is something that we have to respect. But there's no reason why we can't apply this to economic affairs as well. A true free society would permit voluntary contracts and voluntary associations in all areas. And it hasn't always been this way as it is today, where social liberty and economic liberty are separate. It has only been in the 20th century that we have divided these two, and there's no reason why we can't look at liberty in a unified manner. Those individuals who want freedom of choice in personal and social affairs should certainly recognize that those of us that believe in economic freedom ought to have those same choices. This great division has occurred and has led to a great deal of confusion in this country. Today we're making this token effort to re-legalize in a very small manner this voluntary contract to allow workers to make a freedom of choice on how they would like to use their overtime, taking the money or using it as comp time. There is no reason why we should prohibit this. It is legal in the public sector. There's no reason why we can't legalize a little bit of freedom for the worker in the private sector as well. Thank you.
This time has expired.
Mr. Paul from Texas. Gentleman from Texas recognized for a period of 5 minutes, and the gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow we will vote on the very important issue of partial birth abortion. I would like to address that subject for a few minutes. I have practiced obstetrics and gynecology for more than 30 years and have delivered thousands of babies. I have never needed to, nor have I known of any circumstance where the partial birth abortion procedure was necessary for the health of the mother. Quite to the contrary, it is my most sincere conviction that the procedure itself is quite dangerous to the mother. When it was first said by the Right to Life advocates that this procedure was being done frequently, I was reluctant to believe this possible, considering its danger and its grotesque nature. It was only after the admission by the proponents of abortion that indeed it was done frequently and on healthy babies that I was willing to consider that we had slipped to the point where this operation is promoted as an acceptable medical procedure. The notion that this procedure should be available for the protection of the health of the mother is disingenuous, to say the least. As a physician who encountered intrauterine fetal death in the second and third trimester, I have never entertained the thought of performing this procedure because of the risks to the mother. Using the mother's health as an excuse for abortion reminds me of what I witnessed in the 1960s as an obstetrical resident. Physicians defying the law were using a legal loophole, saying that if an individual threatened suicide, it was a justification for abortion. It was a matter of course to make a phone call and get a commitment from a sympathetic psychiatrist to say yes, he would sign the papers, and that's all it took. It's one thing to defend abortion because one sincerely believes it should be legal, but it's another thing to distort the truth, fudge the statistics, and pretend that it's done for the health of the pregnant woman. This should be exposed for the falsehood that it is. I'm convinced that abortion is the most important issue of the 20th century. Whether a civilized society treats human life with dignity or contempt will determine the outcome of that civilization. Supporters for legalization of abortion in the 1960s never dreamed it would come to the debate that we face today over this grotesque procedure, the partial birth abortion. In determining whether or not this country endorses this procedure, we make a moral statement of the utmost importance regarding the value of human life. The legislative approach to abortion is of lesser consequence than the issue itself. Abortion regulation, like all acts of violence, traditionally and under the Constitution, were dealt with locally until 1973, when the courts choose to legalize nationally the procedure. Removing the issue from the jurisdiction of the federal courts so states could deal with all the problems surrounding abortion would be more in line with the traditional constitutional approach to government. Obviously, all funding for any government ought to be prohibited in a society that pretends to protect human life and defend individual liberty. It is now a worn-out cliche that abortion is defended in the name of women's rights and freedom of choice. But claiming to protect the freedom of one individual can never be an excuse to take the life of another. Life and liberty are never in conflict. Life and convenience may well be. The inconvenience and responsibility of caring for a hungry, crying baby at 3 a.m. never justifies baby killing, nor is an inconvenient baby in the womb a justification for its elimination. For those who cry out for choice, let me point out that someone must speak out for the small, the weak, and the disenfranchised so their choice for life is heard. No one in this body can challenge me on my defense of personal choice in all social, personal, and economic matters. But I do not accept the notion that choice means the right to take the life of a human being. That's a mockery of the English language and truth. Those so bold who today would argue that choice means not only the killing of the unborn, but the partially born as well, I say to you, where are you when it comes to real choice in economic transactions, hiring practices, gun ownership, use of private property, confiscatory taxing policy, taking personal risk, picking schools for our children, medications and medical procedures not yet approved by the FDA? Let me hear no more about choice as the excuse to kill. Please, with due respect, pick another less offensive word. This great debate over life has lasted now for over 30 years, and it took the partial birth abortion procedure to crystallize vividly exactly what this debate is all about. The deliberate killing of a half-born infant with heart beating, arms and legs flailing, and a chest struggling for a first breath by aspirating the infant's brain is to many of us an uncivilized, abhorrent, and unacceptable procedure. Yet we as a nation, now without a moral bearing, appear frozen as to what to do. The debate has boiled down to this: should the police be called, or should the abortionists be paid a handsome fee? For now, the best we can do is make a statement that there is a limit, and we have reached it. Hopefully someday there will be enough respect for local governments to handle problems like this, but we must forcefully acknowledge that the defense of all liberty requires the respect for all life.
Thank you, Mr. Brady, and I especially welcome you to our group and appreciate very much the leadership that you've taken on this particular issue. And I think your points are well taken. We've begun that road. We've got a great distance to travel, and we look forward to working with you during this 105th Congress. I'd be happy to yield to another Texan. I don't know that necessarily that Texans have a corner on family virtue, but happy to yield to my friend Mr. Paul.
Thank you very much for yielding. Appreciate that very much. I'm delighted that you have called this special order tonight, and I'm pleased that I can participate in it. Earlier today we had a vote on the Working Families Flexibility Act. This came out of the committee that I had been working on, and I was a strong supporter of this, and we did promote this as a family-oriented piece of legislation. And as we all know, this piece of legislation allowed more choices for the family in the way they can spend their overtime or the time off. Obviously, this is a benefit to the families. In one way, I was a little bit disappointed that we had to go through it, because if you live in a free society, it is assumed that you can make these agreements with your employer. But under the circumstances, it was not available to many of our families unless we passed this piece of legislation, so I was delighted that we were able to do that. During that debate, I mentioned that one of my favorite bumper stickers says simply, legalize freedom. And anytime we do that in this Congress, I am very pleased. The other thing that I would like to suggest, along with our nice title there, Strong Families for a Better America, I would like to put a subtitle there and say, freedom is family friendly. I think the more freedom we have, the stronger our families are. We have seen a tremendous effort, sincere efforts, over the past 30 or 40 years with the promotion of the welfare state, and we've always done in the name of helping people and helping families. But quite frankly, there's very little evidence to show that the $5 trillion spent on the welfare system has strengthened our families. Matter of fact, I think it has done quite the opposite. In the same sense, these many funds were spent to strengthen education, and if we look at our educational system, it has not helped. So if we have an educational system that's not working, hardly are we doing much benefit to our families. So I think the opposite of the statement, freedom is family friendly, I think big government is not. I do not believe that if power and authority and responsibility gravitates here to Washington, that it is beneficial to the family. The more freedom we have, the more local options we have, the more choice we have for our families, I think the better off we are. Obviously, families would have a lot more choices if they had a lot less taxes. So we've emphasized that as well. And I think reducing taxes on families and giving tax credits for children would certainly be a great benefit. I would like to bring up very briefly one subject that's dear to my heart because it involves families. It is generally believed by many in this country that the women's movement was the main reason why women went out to work. Quite frankly, I think there are a lot of women who were forced to work in order to take care of their families in the best way they could see fit. And this, to me, was so often a reflection of inflation because of the cost of living. I believe that eventually we have to address this subject and deal with it to make sure that our families have the greatest opportunity possible that we can provide for them. Thank you very much.
Will the gentleman yield? I think your points are well taken, particularly as far as the workplace is concerned. I think that, of course, with both, when you have two-parent families and both parents are having to work to pay the tax bill, I think what we have done today, again, is a step in that direction as far as helping provide some balance in the workplace. With more flexibility for employees, and again, this is just the step, I think, in the right direction. I know that the dean of our Republican delegation from Missouri, Jim Talent, who is the chair of the Small Business Committee, has also got measures that he will be addressing, like home-based businesses and really promoting ways that home-based businesses can help balance the job as well as family responsibilities.
I think it's interesting to note that the workers in the public sector have already had this right. I think it was only fair that we give this to the individual workers throughout the country.
I think the gentleman's correct, and thanks for yielding. I think that you know, the misnomer and perhaps some of the misinformation about the Flexibility Act is that somehow it abolishes or abrogates the 40-hour work week, which of course it does not. I'm happy to yield. I see the gentleman from Alabama is in the well of the House, and happy to yield to him.